Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Great. So my origin story begins before me, as all of our origin stories do, but I grew up in a Buddhist monastery just 2 hours north of here in a place called the City of 10,000 Buddhas. And my story involves a monk, a politician, and an immigrant. But this Chinese monk came from China and is credited with bringing Buddha Dharma from China to the West in the 60s. He was a real estate investing monk, Xuanhua, my teacher, who invested in a real estate building and taught meditation to the hippies in Haight and Ashbury. And many of those hippies became my teachers growing up in this monastery. They teach economics, philosophy, theology at Stanford and Berkeley, but these were my high school teachers. And as you can imagine, for those of you who know me, I was quite the rebellious child. But I did graduate valedictorian in a class of 6 people.
Yay.
And then went on to undergraduate freshman class at Berkeley, 600 in 1997, in the 90s. The other part of my story actually also precedes me. In the 2000s, the first democratically elected president of Taiwan, who's my uncle once removed. And he was not designated by the Chinese Communist Party, but elected by the people, and is one of the last remaining democracies, Chinese governed, but remaining after Hong Kong and Macau. Taiwan is a little tropical nation that actually holds 60% of the world's market share in semiconductors. It is also the first Asian country to legalize gay marriage, but yet it is at risk. My uncle is and was a brilliant lawyer, but part of this origin story and how it impacts us is we have spent so much to build a modern democracy in Asia, founded in technology and bringing forth all the capital, but at the end of the day, this is the future that we're facing when Ukraine is attacked by Russia and China is looking to take over Taiwan, and Hong Kong and Macau have been integrated back in. What is the future of democracy in Asia and the world, and what is technology and capital's role in that? And of course, I identify as the oldest daughter who is not a son of Taiwanese American immigrants who came to California. My mom didn't want to have anything to do with politics or business in Taiwan. She became a teacher and raised me in a Buddhist monastery. My father watched one too many John Wayne movies and came chasing the American dream. And then, of course, my mom had the California dream because I was raised in a Buddhist monastery in a commune. So that's really the background of my origin story. And over the course of 25 years, I rejected my religious background completely and chased material wealth for 15 years. I started out in Silicon Valley in 1997, very lucky to work for one of the first finance PR firms for the dot-com industry. We told Google no when they were looking to raise capital in 1997, but we said yes to Mark Benioff when he was doing his first 17 mil raise. And our firm went on to represent Andreessen Horowitz, the first founder-friendly VC, the first 10, 15 years of Facebook, and a lot of other startups that actually don't exist anymore. I then went as an adult, went back and worked in the family office space in China for 10 years in corporate mergers and acquisitions. If you guys all know the story of Crazy Rich Asians, they always start the kid on the declining asset. So I worked in manufacturing after years in tech, in semiconductor and consumer manufacturing for 10 years, understanding how widgets are produced and how we add value around the world. After we had grown our company from 2,000 to 10,000 people, we had to lay off 6,000 people in the 2008 recession. I had acquired several manufacturing facilities in Europe and North America, and it was very hard for me to see hundreds of employees being laid off. So I went to work for the Obama administration during 2008 recession, investing in place-based innovation, workforce and economic development in Portland. And then I had a midlife crisis and ended up in Australia. And I found over the course of 20 some years, I have been at the birth and the exit of unicorns all around the world, from China to the Australia, New Zealand outback to the Pacific Northwest. And something that has given me a unique perspective on is it is all about investing talent, pulling human capital, financial capital, and social capital into place. So that's a bit of my story.
Thanks for sharing that. And I'm very curious how that all led to where you are in terms of the values you're advocating for right now. So my next question is, what insights do you have from moving from the traditional investing frame into a regenerative frame and earth-centric frame? Like, what insights you have to offer to us on how to build in the sector, how to invest into it, and how to catalyze the growth really of human tech?
So this talk is about systemic flourishing, and I want to just emphasize I don't believe that systemic change is possible. I believe things can be created and birthed, but they can't be changed. And because we have been driven by a zero-sum game that's rooted in extractiveness, we are looking to iterate or change and improve on the old, which means we actually never get the opportunity to create a future of shared prosperity. So a question I like to ask is, what do you believe the future is going to look like, and what kind of ancestors do you want to be? We're a really interesting pivot point in human history. There's 120 trillion transferring in intergenerational wealth right now. The statistics show that 90% of that will be lost by the third generation, meaning it will be taxed. Do we trust government to have good policy to deploy that capital? It will be donated to charities and NGOs. Are those nonprofits equipped to scale change? And it will be spent. And so what was all this productivity over this last industrial revolution for if we're just going to lose it all by the third generation? So it just really begs a much bigger question of what kind of ancestors do we want to be? So just very quickly, we could be talking and focusing on the 1% billionaire, or we could be having a conversation about the billions of heirs. It's moving from centralization to decentralization. We can react to either a utopian or dystopian future. I think we already know we're not heading toward a utopian future, but either way, that's still reacting from a place of fear. If we design a future together, that's protopia, and it's creating from a place of love. If we move away from farms and uniformity and think about the rainforest model of ecosystems, we're talking about diversity, not just biodiversity, but diversity of capital, diversity of talent, diversity of species. That means that we can actually shift from a future that's based on independent nation states, governed by governments, led by governments, to interdependent microeconomies rooted in ecosystems, living ecosystems. From scarcity to abundance, from a legacy of heroes, the way we tell the story of Silicon Valley's hustle, to a tapestry of weavers, where we're talking about creators and co-creators. Moving or shifting from control of power to a frequency of trust, moving from influencing to coherence. We talk a lot about collateral damage being a trauma-informed society. It's all based on linear. There's a cause and effect and consequences. But what about the collateral beauty? What about taking a spatial view? And shifting our learning and unlearning from colonization, which is rooted in ownership and the right to destroy and subjugate, to sovereignty, which is all about collective stewardship. And really, at the end of the day, we know how to do this. We know where we've been. We're training AI on a history of violent colonization. And so we have drugged ourselves. We have been lulled by technology to forget. And so it's time to remember what we already know. And so I ask again, like, how do we participate in the future? I always say, you can take the perception mode and as a game. How many of you guys play video games? Yeah? So you know you can take the role of the avatar. You can switch your different characters. You can also take the role of a player, knowing that you are switching characters. Or you can go into God mode. And remember that we're here to design this game together. So what is the game that we want to play? And as you guys know who have worked in like complex systems change, it's all about if the end game is shared prosperity, how do we redesign the structure for incentive? Everyone at the UN talks about distribution and wealth distribution. That's still a game of centralized power, deciding who they get to distribute power, wealth, and knowledge to, and education. And so if we flip it on its head and we start with sovereignty first, that begins with knowledge. How the wealthy teach their children how to transfer that wealth is very different from those on welfare. But if education was free and accessible, like in Bhutan, which I'll talk about in a bit, we actually have the opportunity for all to be on a path of creation and have their agency to create wealth and therefore distribute and share power. And so it's about participation, it's not about distribution. Step one really is unlearning our violent history of colonization, geographic, religious. Right now it's a little bit more hidden because it's economic and technological, but it's still happening, probably even more so than ever. Early days of AI simulations, they had two games competing to try to decide what the outcome of the future would be. And in like 1,000 scenarios, they just ended up killing each other. And it was because that data is being trained on our history, which doesn't include indigenous wisdom, ancestral wisdom, natural intelligence. It's being trained on what we know how to do, which is representative democracy through subjugation, colonization. And then they realized, oh, this game was actually designed by 30, 25 to 35-year-olds in Silicon Valley. Maybe we should include some grandmothers or some women in this game design. And then they reran the simulation and it negotiated a peace treaty, like after 3 rounds. So we really have to just question how the game is designed, who the game is being designed for, and who's actually designing the game, and what biases they may hold. So in my experience of working in innovation ecosystems all over the world, I always talk about seeds of change. It's not just about seeding and catalyzing an innovation economy that creates shared prosperity. It's about how do we financially, economically, environmentally sustain it. And so it takes 5 years to transform and build trust within a team. I have seen markets change within 10 years, and everything that's valued on the Fortune 500 company, they're going to be gone in 10 years. Like 30% of those companies will not exist. So that's 10 years to transform a market, create a new market. I've seen this happen over and over globally, and it's 20 years to change the economy. And it's really that these numbers have consistently showed itself.
Where do you think we are on the 20-year timeline for Silicon Valley to go from extractive to regenerative?
I mean, I've been overseas for 15 years in Asia, and I kind of feel like we're going backwards, but or maybe in a circle. Yeah. But we're at an interesting inflection point. I would just say that we, since Google pitched, that was what, 26 years ago? Yeah, about 26 years ago. So it is true, it took 5 years for them to commercialize, 10 years to transform a market, and 20 years for Silicon Valley to become the market leader it is. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is my favorite quote. I don't really have a lot of, I don't really like Pablo Picasso's art, but I always love this quote: learn the rules like a pro and break them like an artist. And in the age of AI, when productivity becomes, the future productivity, rooted in productivity, becomes less important. It's more about creativity. And so again, I just highlight, we talk about in investment, we always talk about investment as leverage. What are we leveraging? We're leveraging data, we're leveraging what we know, and it is totally biased on human intelligence, which is rooted in materialism. And now we're treating artificial intelligence as either a slave or a god that either has all the answers or it's there to do our bidding. It's not our co-creator. It's not here to serve all of us. It's here to serve some of us. And so what about the ancestral intelligence and the natural intelligence that we have completely excluded from our AI training models? I was part of a group, some of you guys were there, Vice Yvonne. We were at the Up Game where they're doing an immersive series of games all around the world for different types of people coming together, and they've built Gaia AI. They have translated 27 indigenous languages that have been lost or nearly lost and kept in oral tradition, and they're training Gaia AI on it. But they're also training with 100 different types of retreat programs where we're having people like us are coming together, having conversations, and those ideas, thoughts, and insights are actually what's also training Gaia AI. Comes up with very different solutions than Gemini and ChatGPT. So I ask again, what is the game we want to play? Let's go to the base assumption of how do we define and create value. Having worked in mergers and acquisitions, and those of you guys who work in the investment space, it is all about valuation. But we have seen certain companies, AI startup quickly raise 100 million, and a gender equity fund try to allocate that same 100 million to try to fund 1,000 grassroots movements in 40 different countries. So why is there a disparity? It's because we have a different definition of value in the public sector, in the private sector, and the philanthropic sector. We talk about work-life balance as productivity versus life on earth reciprocity. And if we're just chasing work-life balance, we're not actually showing up who we are. We're bifurcating ourselves as who we are in work and who we are in life. But there's just life at the end of the day. And there's all of life on earth. And we going into separation means that we separate ourselves from what is possible together.
We're solving for a giant integration problem from individuals all the way up to the planet. Right? Yeah.
So zero-sum game. These are my 2 slides that Ming let me share on frameworks, right? And the zero-sum game is a game of winner takes all. It's about controlling supply and demand between makers, buyers, and owners. There's capital, there's assets, and there's markets. If we look really closely to the individual self, it is forcing a siloed self from a place of fear, scarcity, and dependence. And this cycle is bigger and reflects our greater economy. So if we're trying to change the future economy to be socioeconomic and environmental impact, then we need to begin with ourselves and what we define as value. The positive sum game the framework I like to talk about is hearth, health, and wealth. And I'll be doing a workshop later on wisdom as wealth. It's really looking at who are the people that keep us safe, keep us creative, and keeps us collaborating. And that is rooted in a self that is love, freedom, and safety, and there's shared prosperity. So we win together. In the innovation capital game, we talk a lot about ROI. All return on investment should be return on impact too. And those two things are inextricably linked. Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, I want to say a few words, especially on this point, because it's kind of the work that we're shared. It takes an ecosystem to build one. So one of the things we're doing at the Flourishing Systems Foundation is doing deep research and experimentation on what alternative to ROI could be. So currently we're calling one of them return to flourishing, right? Or in Carson's words, it's more generative. So it might not be returning to something old, but rather generating something new with the ancient wisdom that we do have. So you'll see this theme throughout kind of like Bonnie's work, Compassion's work, Flourishing Systems work, Superhuman Society's work. So like a lot of folks are experimenting this. So I want to extend an invite. If you want to step into the frame, if this all sounds great, join us in doing research, in doing experimentation, right? And then sharing that results as an ecosystem so we can keep knowing how to build regenerative businesses, invest in them, and not just feel good that we can talk about it at a conference and kind of go home. Because I know that a lot of this is ground truth that we all resonate with already, and what we need is how to actually action on them. So anyway, I want to extend the invite, and we'll do a much deeper dive at Bonnie's workshop on the second floor this afternoon on this topic. And I know Lauren hasn't got a chance to talk about her talk on polycrisis and systems change. And you ladies should chat about how systems cannot be changed. I learned that from both of you, right? And it's very important. So talk to her about polycrisis, going from extractive to regenerative. We'll do a roundtable downstairs as well. These things are hard for a 20-minute stage talk or fireside. We want to invite you to engage with us to actually action on them.